Key and relationship. In this lecture, I will walk you through the primary key, foreign key, and the relationship in ERD. Let's start by talking about the primary key first. Primary key is a table column. It is a column or a set of columns. It should be a columns, multiple columns, which uniquely identify the record you want. Let's take an example. So we have a member table here. We have so many records. If I ask a question, can you give me a phone number of Nancy Ward? So the problem is we have three Nancy here. Which Nancy you want? In this case, we need to introduce another column called ID to identify which row of data you expect. So you can select to say I want the number, the phone number of ID number 2, say something like that. So the presentation of the primary key is a key. You see the key icon on the left hand side of the column. When you're picking a column to be a primary key, you need to check with following conditions or following things before you pick it as a primary key. Is it unique? It is unique to identify the row of data. Is it mandatory? So the primary key cannot be null or empty. Is it constant? You will not change the value of the primary key. Let's check each column. The member name, is it unique? May not. We see the Nancy Ward, we print the name. Is it mandatory? Yes, it is mandatory. Is it constant? Yes, it is constant. At least we will not change our name so often, but it's not unique, so we can't use it as a primary key. How about the social security number? Is it unique? Yes, it is unique. At least we don't have two same social security number, same security number for two persons. Is it mandatory? It is a yes or no question. If you only serve the United States residents, that can be fine. It is mandatory. But if you also serve other countries' customer, then you can't use the SSN. Is it constant? Yes, it is constant, but it is not mandatory if you want to serve international customer, so we can't use it. How about the email address? Is it unique? Yes, it is unique. You can't go to the same email address. Is it mandatory? Yes, it is mandatory. Is it constant? Also, yes or no question. If you allow the user to change the email address, then it is not constant. Finally, how about to have a computer-generated ID? Is it unique? Yes, it's unique. Is it mandatory? Yes, it's mandatory. Is it constant? Yes, after you generate it, you will not change it, so it's constant. In this case, we will pick the computer-generated ID as a primary key. Primary key can be a single column or group of columns. When you define more than one column as a primary key, we will name it composite key. Let's take an example. Here we have a photo and the photo sharing table. Each photo will have its role, but one photo can share to more than one member. In this case, the photo ID in photo sharing table is not unique. We are allowed to share the same photo to multiple team members. And even the team member is not unique because he can have multiple photos shared to him. In this case, we need to combine these two columns to form a unique primary key. Then we call it a composite key. You will see both columns will have the key icon on the left hand side. Regarding the primary key, we also need to think about how to assign the value to the primary key. Basically, there are three popular approaches. You can use a computer-generated ID. You can specify the ID by your program manually, or it can use the sequence. Let's take a look on each. Regarding auto-generated ID, it is very common to use and very efficient. When you insert the data into the table, the database engine will assign a new ID to your row of data. So later on, you can retrieve it by the ID. The second option is to specify the ID manually. And take an example for the SSN. When you insert the record into the table, you need to provide the SSN at the same time. The value is mandatory. It cannot be null or empty. And the example of manual assigned primary key could be the social security number, email address, if you don't allow the user to change the email address, or the ISBN, which is quite unique. The third option is the sequence. The sequence allows the database to generate an ID for your new record. But the generation is based on your setting, including the interval, mean, and max value. And the sequence can be defined in different database engines have a different sequence defined mechanism, but the idea is similar. If you want to define ascending sequence, you specify the mean value start from 1, a max value really big value. Make sure it is enough to accommodate the number of rows you want to insert. And the max value to start with, which value we start with 1. Increment by how each value will generate it. We say 3. The cache, usually we'll have this property to allow the database engine to optimize the speed. Then you can cache some value on the memory. In this case, when you insert the data, you will got 1, 4, 7, or 10, etc. Let's take a look on descending sequence. Same is the mean value and the max value. We start from the max this time, and the incremented by is a negative value. Then we will start from the highest value and go down. And there's no cache. So when you insert the record into your table, you will got the ID pattern like this. Okay, let's see how to define the primary key. Define primary key, we have two approaches. One is you can double click on the column, and then at the beginning of the column you type the plus and then press enter. Then you confirm the editing, you will see the key icon is showing. The second option is you open the specification dialog box we talked about in last lecture, and then you go to check the include primary key checkbox. Then the column will become a primary key. After talk about the primary key, let's talk about the foreign key. Foreign key is a table column. Again, it's the table column, and uniquely identify a record in another table. So it's used to identify the record in other table. Primary key is in our table. And let's take a look of an example. Here is the photo table we designed at the very beginning. You see we have the photo detail, the ID, the title of the photo. And on the right hand side of the table, you see the member detail. And we find that the value will keep repeating. You see Chris Wong repeats so many times. Then we decided to split into two tables. One is the photo with the ID and the title, and the member table to have the name, phone number, and address. Then we will introduce a foreign key column called member ID to link or to uniquely identify the member in the member table. This is the look of the foreign key you see when you're using Visual Paradigm. To use the foreign key is for you to uniquely identify the value in other table. Let's move on to talk about the relationship and the cardinality. The relationship is showing the foreign key, and the relationship and cardinality we find three common types. One is one-to-many, which is most popular to use. Another one is 1-to-1 or 1-to-0-to-1, which is optional or not optional. The third one is a many-to-many. Let's take a look one by one. The one-to-many relationship used when the record in the table can reference to multiple records in other table. For example, the member can upload many photos. So from the member side, we can identify many photos he uploaded. The customer can make many reservations. He can reserve many times. The document can have a multiple revision. And the one-to-many relationship and the cardinality is probably the most commonly used type. The second one is a 1 to 0 or 1. It's used to reference to another table, which is you have the record or sometimes have no record. An example is we have a blog post, we can have in single pieces of blog content. Why we need to separate it? Maybe it is so big, the content is storing the multi-kilobytes or multi-megabytes data, so we don't need to get it all by once. The customer can have an address info. It could be the have address or he has no address, so we can save some space. If you're using 1 to 0 and 1, you need to use it carefully. As you can see, you just identify one row in other table. You may ask a question, why don't I just put this column in my table? Just put the address info into the customer. So if you split it, you got gain the performance on use less data. The reason is if you don't fill in the data, it saves the space. And on the other side, you lost the performance due to you need to more storage space to store the structure of the table if you have a data, and more complicated query. When you request the result, you need to join two tables together to return both the customer and the address to you. The conclusion is if your data don't have such referencing table, don't want to read the referencing table record, in most cases say more than 90%, then you can split it. Otherwise, we suggest you put it back to the single table. The many-to-many relationship. Basically, the relational database doesn't support a real many-to-many relationship. In this case, we need to break it down into pair of one-to-many relationship and have an associated entity, associated table between these two entities. And it's used to parent record to reference to multiple record in other table and vice versa. The example is the student can enroll to many courses and the course can be taken by many students. So it is a many-to-many relationship. Another example is the order can contain many products, while the product can also be added to more than one order. That makes sense. Otherwise, why we need to have a separate order? Let's see more example. One member can upload multiple photo. You see it has a multiple photo in other table. Let me show you how to draw it in Visual Paradigm. Here I have the member and photo. You see I have the primary key. Let me just zoom in. You have a primary key, the ID in both tables already. You can create a one-to-many relationship by move the mouse to the resource icon to one-to-many and then drag to the other table to the photo. Then you will see the relationship specification dialog boxes show up. It asks you to pick which column can be used as a foreign key. We use generate default column. Then we generate. Then you will see the member ID is generated. So the member ID is used to uniquely identify the member in the member table. And let's take a look on one-to-one relationship. The blog, they have the blog content. And you have the blog post with the title, summary, etc. And the content is the blog. The content is some long text, so you separate another table. To draw it is similar. You have the blog post, and then you select one-to-one relationship instead of one-to-many this time, and then drag and drop to other table the content. Then the one-to-one relationship is formed. It's also asked you to select the column. You select the default one, then you will see the one-to-one relationship is formed. Let's take a look on many-to-many. We have a photo table, and each photo can have multiple tag. You can tag it as the place, tag the time, or tag a trip name, etc. While the tag can be used in many photos, so we need a many-to-many relationship, like the photo and the tag with a photo tag table in between. Let me just show you how to draw it. Here we have the photo table and the tag table. And to create the many-to-many relationship, you just need to move the mouse to the many-to-many relationship and then drag to the target entity and release your mouse. Then you will see the associated table is created here. If you don't like, you can change the name of the associated table. You remove the underscore. So it's so easy that you create a many-to-many relationship. Let's summarize what we have walked through in this lecture. We talk about the primary key. What is a primary key? How to pick the primary key? What criteria you need to consider to compose a primary key? Different kind of primary key assignment. You can set it as auto-generated, assign it, or use the sequence, and show you how to define a primary key in Visual Paradigm. After that, we talk about the foreign key. We talk about what is a foreign key, different cardinality of the foreign key, and how to define the foreign key by drawing in Visual Paradigm using the resources. So thank you very much for joining this lecture. See you soon in the coming lecture.